Okay.
And then we'll go.
All right, let me get the slide deck started here,
Okay.
and we'll make sure everybody can see that. Let's see.
This is always the part where I'm so glad that I'm not driving this. Okay, so just quickly scroll through these. We've already kind of addressed a lot of them. So we're going to be doing non-affiliated voting basics, who they are, why we need to reach them, deep canvassing basics, understanding how to reach them, practicing the conversation to some degree, and also the logistics of canvassing. I think many of you have had experience with using minivan to enter the data. It's not essential that you use it. We are equipped to handle paper canvassing as well, but obviously it's a lot easier to do it once you learn the techniques of using the minivan. Okay, next slide, please. So we're going to spend about 45 minutes of training time, which we are already in about minute 6, and about 15 minutes for Q&A and practice with minivan. So as we are going through this, I ask you to kind of hold your questions, drop them in the chat, and save them for when we pause for questions. And as we ask you all when you first came in, please stay muted when you're not speaking. A lot of this material came from Indivisible National's program training series, Unlocking Deep Canvassing, and also the Canvas relaunch training. We are using this with permission, but we've also put our own little special Oregon stamp on this. We also had a lot of inspiration from 2 things, and actually 3 things. I'll take that back. 3 things. One was the county in Nevada that flipped from red to blue in 2018. And this was a program that they were using in Washoe County to do exactly what we're intending to do, to reach out to voters that had not been contacted before because they were not on our Democratic voter lists. And by successfully implementing this program, they were able to flip that county. And when we found out about that in 2018, some of our organizers, including Terry Martin down at ORD2 in Jackson County, thought that this was such an inspirational idea that she came up with a kind of an equivalent training program to do this. And then, of course, the pandemic hit just as she was getting ready to implement it in April of 2020. And we had to put it on the shelf for quite a while. And once the pandemic kind of subsided to the extent, and also we were able to get vaccinated and kind of open up a little bit more, we really wanted to reinstitute that. And the other thing that we were drawing inspiration from was what happened in Georgia, and the long-standing campaign that Stacey Abrams and her effort has made in terms of getting out the vote and really connecting with voters who have never participated before, and the effect that had in electing 2 Democratic senators from Georgia for the first, including a Black man for the first time ever. I'm originally from Georgia, and that was like a super exciting thing for me. And I just, like all of those 3 experiences have just been inspirational for all of us at COIN. And we want to share this inspiration and these techniques with everybody so that we can really start to implement this in our state as well. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, please. So we've got, as I mentioned earlier, we've got like an interesting little profile here in Oregon. We have a lot of registered voters. A couple of years ago, we went from about 74% up to about 93% registered voters of the eligible voters. And because we have a system that basically by default will register anybody who is getting their driver's license or renewing their driver's license. The other piece of that is if you do not specify, you will be registered as a non-affiliated voter. So that's the default position now, is that first of all, you're going to get registered. And secondly, when you are registered, you are going to be a non-affiliated voter, a NAV, unless you do something to change that. So we have a very high registration rate. We have an also unusually high NAV population in our electorate, which is 1/3. So essentially, the Democrats are still holding on to a tiny, tiny advantage overall in the voting rolls. Next comes the NAVS, and it's about 1/3 of it. And then right behind them is the Republican registered voters. So these NAVs are essential. We don't have enough registered Democrats, even if they all turn out. We've got to go after the NAVs. And the other thing that is interesting about this is that these voters are ones that did not participate in the primary. So they can't participate in the primary because our primaries are closed. They're closed to the parties, party members only. So these are folks who are potentially less engaged than the party members because they can't participate in the primaries. They don't have that extra opportunity to learn about these candidates that you would if you were a voter in the primaries. And so they often determine the outcome of elections, but they're sometimes not as experienced and knowledgeable as some of the other voters. The other thing is, yeah.
I was just going to say real quick, they non-affiliated voters do participate in the primary in the sense that they only can vote for nonpartisan races. So judges, county commissioners, and so on. So they do participate, but they do not get to vote for the major parties.
Yeah.
So just wanted to make sure.
That is absolutely right. So they do get a ballot, but they don't get, I guess you could call them the kind of fun candidates. They don't get to vote for a gubernatorial primary candidate. They don't get to vote for congressional or Senate or any of those types of elections. The Secretary of State's on there. They don't get to vote for that. So there are a lot of the big ones are ones that they're excluded from. They have their local ones, so they have non-affiliated, anything that's non-affiliated they get to do. So these are voters that are a lot less sort of known to us. We don't really know how they lean. And that's really important for us to find out, where they fit. Some of them are basically, they ended up in that category because they didn't elect to join either party because they were just apathetic. They just weren't, they didn't want to be bothered. Some of them are ones who say, I don't want to belong to a party. I want to preserve my independence and stay and just not be sort of affiliated with a party. And it's kind of a principled stand. So you get a number of people who do that. But we do really need to find out about them so that we can make sure that we do reach out to them. There are a lot of statistics about these, and I'm not going to go into all of that, but it's really important for us to identify who these NAVs are in terms of the issues that really resonate with them. So are these folks that, are for whom Second Amendment rights are really important? Are they ones for whom Roe versus Wade being overturned is a huge deal? Or is it important for them to know are they concerned about voting rights, which we have, wonderful systems here in the state of Oregon, but it's threatened across the country. And is this something that concerns them? So these are all ways that we can identify these NAVs and understand the issues that motivate them. So we're going to try to identify progressive NAVs so that we can later target them for get out the vote efforts. We need to understand the types of issues so that when we contact them again, we know where they're coming from, so that we know, like, this is a person for whom, they have a big independent streak, but they're also very concerned about Republican efforts to abolish or severely cut back Social Security. I mean, maybe it's an elderly person who wants to keep a gun, but also doesn't want their Medicare to go away. And we're also, so we need to find out about them, more about them, where they lean on the political spectrum, find out what issues resonate with them. And we want to make sure that you folks who are attending this training tonight learn the techniques so that we can accomplish that, so that we can work together and in the future, not just for tonight, not just for our upcoming canvassing events and phone banking, but we're looking at this as a long-term project, because as happened in Washoe County in Nevada that I was just speaking about, it took them a while. And it certainly took Stacey Abrams 10 years in Georgia. Now we're hoping that we don't have to do something that's quite that long term, but knowing what these voters, where they fit on the spectrum is going to help us not just for this fall election and not just for one or two races, but it's going to help us up and down the ballot. And it's also going to help us in 2024 because this information will also be useful then. Okay, next slide.
I'm going to add one thing. So we're talking about around 1 million voters. Oregon has about 1 million non-affiliated voters. So we're not going to reach them all before November. So Mary's point about this being a long range goal is really valid. It'll take us a few years probably to reach all 1 million of them. And I think is that our next slide? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
So if you want to go ahead and take a moment to ask some questions in the chat. I can't really see the chat because I'm screen sharing. So Beverly or Mary, can you kind of check on that to identify if we've got some questions? Or if someone has a question, you can also unmute yourself. And
yeah, there's no questions in the chat right at the moment.
somebody-
Everybody's on the same page, maybe?
It looks like Bonnie Walker wanted to go back to the previous slide before the questions, I think.
These are our project objectives.
Are there any questions about, what we're trying to accomplish and why?
Mhm.
So there's a question here about how many NAVs are actually registered. I've got that number here someplace. Hang on.
About 1 million.
Yeah,
About
1 million. Yeah.
Okay.
Somewhere around 1 million.
So this is huge. We
And it's
cannot
growing.
re-elect it, and it's growing because that change that happened a couple of years ago, that's going to continue to be, affect the voter registrations because it is a default system. Basically, all you do is get your driver's license and you're automatically registered to vote, unless you're, not eligible to vote because you're not an American citizen or something like that. But you will be automatically registered to vote, and unless you do something, you will be registered as a NAV. So yes, Monica, the goal is to get information about the NAVs from them by doing this kind of deep conversations with them to find out what types of issues resonate with them, what their concerns are, because we're thinking that we will be able to kind of figure out where they fit on a spectrum, so that they will be able to, so we will be able to then follow up with them in the future, closer to the election, and make sure that they turn out to vote. If you're familiar,
I think the important point here is that we'll follow up with GOTV efforts for the NAVs that we identify in these earlier canvases as leaning progressive. If we talk to somebody who is definitely a Trump supporter, we're gonna mark them as leaning conservative, and we won't make GOTV efforts. We won't be going back and reminding those folks to get out and vote. So this is designed particularly to identify progressive leaning NAVs to help us get them out to vote. Because, for instance, in this last primary election, 1 million non-affiliated voters, but only 14% of them voted. So, it's a pretty small turnout, and there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there.
so I think how many people here are familiar with Swing Left and Vote Forward? Yeah, so I think a lot of us have participated in that. As you know, that is a nonpartisan effort, but it is kind of targeted at people that we think that are voters that we'd like to turn out. This is kind of aimed at doing the same thing. So we got some more interference here.
Oh, wow. It's not me.
Could that be Sarah Chan? Maybe. I think she's not muted. If you are muted. Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you. So, so the idea here is that we are non-part. We're not going to be talking about any candidates. We're not going to be talking about Democratic or Republican candidates or races or anything like that. We're going to be talking about issues. And from that information, we're going to be discerning where people fall.
And Alan brings up a good point. There's households with mixed parties. And so that does, that's going to happen. There's no way to avoid that. So it happens when you go and talk to, you've got a Dem list, you're going to talk to Dems, and the person that answered the door is not the Dem you want to talk to, it's the Republican husband, right? So it's just one of those things when you're canvassing that can happen. And it's just comes from experience and how to work with that.
So I saw from a flash that Bonnie Walker had her hand raised, but then it disappeared. So I don't know if you still have a question, Bonnie. And if so, just go ahead and unmute and ask it.
Sure, thanks. I actually was just trying to say forward and the other one swing left, but I did have a question because I guess I'm going to make a big stand here. I actually think it's really unethical for our state to have a closed primary with that level of non-affiliated voters. So I'm just wondering, is it part of the COIN platform to, promote and advocate for an open primary in Oregon?
There has been some talk about it. We have not been really involved in that, as COIN leadership. But, there are some groups that are talking about it, and we're listening, to hear about them. But to be honest with you, it seems like, what we're hearing is that it seems very unlikely, because the two political parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, will really put up a fuss about it and make it not happen. That's kind of what I'm hearing. That doesn't mean that it's impossible, but we haven't gotten engaged in that yet. But it is something that we might consider in the future.
Looks like Monica has her hand up, and then if we don't have any further questions, we probably ought to get to the next phase, which is going to be, how do you do all this? So Monica?
Okay, first of all, there are about 4 more questions in the chat. I hope you can
sorry.
see that. There was an effort to try to deal with this issue, Bonnie, like you're saying, that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party were not interested in this. They didn't see that this is beneficial. So there was an effort to get it on the ballot. There's a petition signature effort like you've seen with many other issues, and that was not successful. So I think the only thing we could do in the future as far as COIN is try to get behind getting it on the ballot another time, maybe in 2024, and have a bigger effort to get it on the ballot.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for bringing it up. And thanks for that additional information, Monica. Okay, so the chat questions.
It looks like there's a question from Carl about issues. Will they be national, state, or local? I think we're going to be talking. Well, first of all, we're going to ask people, what are the things that concern you? So we're going to have it open. If they don't have anything that they come up with, there's a kind of a list of things that we can go through. I mean, it can be, some of these are all 3 of them. I mean, like climate is equal, it's local, state, and national. Abortion rights, a lot of these issues are kind of across the board. So, but we're going to ask them what they're interested in.
And that question's actually going to be answered a little bit later. We are going to see the script, and so you'll see, that people will have the option of answering about local issues as well as state or national issues. That we'll get to that. Other questions in the chat?
I don't see any more, but
okay, I'll read it. If this is a pilot, what is the vision for the expansion of this effort after this pilot's done?
Well, I would have to say that we're this is actually our 4th training, and we are doing some canvassing. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But, the basic idea is just to continue expanding so that we're reaching more parts of the state and reaching more voters, but also creating this database that we'll be able to use, as Mary mentioned, to go back at election time for get out the vote efforts. So it's really kind of a 2-piece project. First, gather the data, and then go back to these voters at election time to remind them to vote.
which reminds me of the idea, we have this VAN, we have access to the VAN, the Voter Action Network database, which is a totally clean database, as you want to call it. There's been no activity on it, there's been no canvassing, very little. So as we go, we are adding to this database. So the more people we have engaged and going out and canvassing and entering the information, the better our data will be. The other part of this too that we haven't mentioned yet is that we cannot share information with the campaign or the Democratic Party. It is indivisible information. So we have to draw the line there, and we cannot share our information. So this is separate from the campaign. Anything that's public knowledge is public knowledge, but otherwise anything that we gain from this process and the information we get, we cannot share.
That's exactly right. Thank you for reminding us of
The
that.
other one is why target the NAVs who live with Republicans?
Yeah, I sort of talked about that. There's no real way of avoiding that kind of scenario. It can happen, you know, households, you can't just say, I'm only going to go to households that are all NAVs. That would be pretty hard to do. And then Freddie has a question.
Freddie, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I had to unmute in both places.
Okay.
I'm actually a field organizer for a campaign for county commissioner. Should I be here? If you're talking about not wanting to share this information with campaigns?
We're not going to share any information with you. It's fine for you to be here. We're not sharing any data with you.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, we're just sharing what Indivisible is doing and training people in how to
Canvas.
talk to NAV voters with deep canvassing. And so that's our next step. So yeah.
I see. You were talking about the data. I thought you were referring to like this information as a whole. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
and things like coordinating, like, okay, we're going to go out and canvass in this area because we know that the campaign is canvassing in a different area. So we're going to coordinate that we're not overlapping. Those are the kinds of things that aren't allowed.
And we do appreciate the fact that you raised your hand and asked, because that is very important. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So
The last question in the chat is who does most of the talking, us or the people at the door?
This is
Well,
going to be part of the training, so stay tuned.
that's a great segue to the next section.
Yeah.
We'll have to stay, it'll have to stay a mystery for a couple more minutes. Okay,
Yeah.
Here we go.
So deep canvassing basics, what it is, why it works, and how to do it. So that was the question, and here we go. So we're going to talk about deep canvassing and get into sort of the nuts and bolts. There's a lot of training on deep canvassing available out there. Indivisible did their first training. It was 4 sessions, 1 hour each. And as you can tell by what we're doing tonight, it's not going to be 4 hours long. So condensed. And what we'd like to suggest is that to take advantage of the other trainings that are available as you go along and learn. Some of you are probably experienced canvassers. It is just another level of canvassing that is different than canvassing specifically for a candidate. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Deep canvassing is really having a conversation to connect with the voter, the person that you're talking to either on the phone or at the door. We're going to be very non-judgmental and just listen. It's a two-way conversation. It's not a persuasive, I can't say the word, persuasive conversation at all. It can be, you use story sharing, and at some point we can even get into processing, collecting conflicting beliefs and kind of see what the different viewpoints are. So we're not going to tell somebody how to vote, when to, nothing about persuasion. It's not convincing, simply a conversation to understand. So one of our first training, we had a very experienced canvasser Jeff Kidder, who was at the training, and he had done some deep canvassing. And one of his tips was to pretend like you are a reporter to get information. So you're just gathering information as opposed to being, judging that information. So I thought that was kind of a handy tip. So let's go to the next slide. So why does deep canvassing work? It really works because we're engaging in conversations. We're not offering facts. Facts do not change people's feelings, even though we all probably love our facts. We kind of liked all those facts that we just learned about how many NAVs there are and their voting record and so on. But that's not the kind of stuff that really changes people's minds. So core political beliefs is something that is really in people's minds. If they believe it, facts are not going to change it. So we probably have all experienced that in just our conversations with people, or all that kind of crazy stuff we do on the internet when we make comments to people when they say something really crazy, and we kind of come back with our facts. So if facts don't change feelings, what happens and what causes that? So there's two basic premises. First is the binary bias, black or white, black or white thinking. If I'm right, everybody else is wrong. So that's just clear. That's the way it is. It's black or white, period. That basically keeps us from, understanding or seeing what the other person, the conversation about, stepping in somebody's shoes or seeing it from their shoes. But we really don't want to do that if we have this binary bias, because we really think we're right. It's just really, we're not going to listen. And it is a very easy way to start that whole process of us and them, the other side. It's the other side. So the binary bias is, it's a natural thing that happens to us. So when you know that, then it really does help when you're having these conversations. The next one is confirmation bias. And this is where you seek anything that confirms what you think. The news you watch, the articles you read, all of this information comes to you, and if it matches with how you feel, then you will accept it. If it doesn't match, you don't pay attention to it, or you just don't even seek it out. And then you get into this trusted messenger loop where everything you are hearing and seeing is the same information, and pretty soon, that nothing's going to challenge your viewpoint. The trusted messenger loop just keeps the loop going. And it's hard to understand. We all do it ourselves. And so when you see it happening, when you're talking to somebody, then you can understand where it's coming from, why people are so entrenched in what they're thinking. It's because these are two very natural human traits, and we all do it, whether we like to admit it or not. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any thoughts or comments about binary and confirmation bias? All right, so if facts don't change mind, what does? So now you have put on your thinking caps and say, when was there a time when you changed your mind on something that happened in your life and you clearly changed your mind? What did it take for you to change your mind?
Go ahead and drop it in the chat. Can the rest of you see chat? Because of with my screen sharing, I'm not able to see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
See if
I see Regina says personal experience. So, and a person I respect, a trusted messenger. Exactly. Experience or conversations with people close to me. Time. Excellent. Most people don't, you know, it can happen where you have a light bulb, what we call a light bulb moment, when you see something clearly that you didn't see before. But typically, it takes some sort of life experience, travel, personal connections with somebody you trust. That is what changes people's minds. And it generally doesn't, as I said, it's not generally a light bulb moment. It generally happens over some amount of time. We have evidence in the news or national events, and there's that over time. So we are going to be going and talking to people, and we are not going to be changing anybody's minds overnight or at that particular conversation. So that's why it's really important to remember that there's the binary bias, the confirmation bias, and the idea that our facts are not going to change minds. So how can we use this to our advantage when we're doing deep canvassing?
Are you ready for the next slide?
Yeah, I think that's you, Debbie.
Oh, I seem to be a little frozen here.
Uh-oh.
I can't get to the next slide.
Oh, shoot. Well, the next slide is the 5 steps of canvassing.
Okay.
Start with,
Wow. Let me stop sharing for a minute, and
back.
sorry about that, folks. And let me try it again.
So while we're waiting for Debbie to do that, has anybody ever had a situation where you're trying to convince somebody of something and they don't go your way? Like a 3-year-old? I have a 3-year-old granddaughter, believe me. You can't, facts are not going to affect her at all. So we do it with our husbands, we do it with our kids, thinking about this from that sort of a personal situation where people people that even you love, maybe, that are not, you can't convince. So you could even use this for personal relationships. All right, so
I wanted to just finish with what Beverly was, to kind of conclude what Beverly was talking about, why we feel this is a really important part of our project is that when we listen without judgment, people feel heard, and when they feel heard, they're more likely to listen to the ideas of others. And I think probably if you think about this, when someone really listened to you and then maybe shared their ideas, you were a little bit more open to listening to their ideas. And so this is how we begin to move people to our point of view. And we're not necessarily working at trying to move them to our point of view with this initial part of the project, but at some point we may want to do that. And so, part of this project is also to teach our participants these deep canvassing skills, these listening skills.
Right,
So,
and just the other part of that too is that if with our conversation with a voter, and maybe something else will happen, to them separate from your conversation, the next day or whatever, they read something that reminds them of the conversation that you had with them. That's all part of the process. It's very interesting how this can work.
Okay, so we'll move on then to the next part of our deep canvassing part of this presentation tonight, and that is how to do it. And sometimes, it's conveniently divided into these 5 steps. But for those of you who have canvassed before, I'm sure you know that there really aren't 5 steps when you're talking to somebody. Sometimes you might start with step 1 and you might then skip down to what might be step 4, or you might leave out step 3 and move on to step 5. And so it's not always a linear process, and not every piece of this puzzle is addressed in every conversation that you have. But to answer that question finally that was asked earlier, who's going to be doing most of the talking? The answer is the voter. We kind of like to use this 70-30 rule. And that is that the people that we're talking to should be talking about 70% of the time, and we might be talking about 30% of the time. Okay, so we've now kind of organized our script into these 5 steps. And I need to move my little screen here with the pictures with your pictures on it, so I can read the screen here. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that this is the piece of the deep canvassing steps, and on the right-hand side is our script. And so we'll go through these 5 different steps and these 5 parts of the script, and you'll see that it's pretty easy, pretty non-threatening to voters, and you know, really probably some of the easiest canvassing you might ever do in our experiences so far with canvassing with this script. So I'll just go ahead and kind of read through the script and say a few words about each part. But to begin the conversation, we want to just introduce ourselves real quickly to get right to the point and not take up too much of our voters' times. So we'll start with, hi, my name is Debbie. Are you Cindy? And if not, you can ask, may I please speak with Cindy if she is home? I'm a volunteer, and when you get to your voter that you're looking for, you can tell them a little bit about yourself. I'm a volunteer with Protect Oregon's Progress, a local grassroots group whose mission it is to hold our elected officials accountable. We're reaching out today to non-affiliated voters such as yourself to find out what issues matter most to you. Non-affiliated voters who don't belong to any political party often get left behind in the electoral process. Okay, so that sounds kind of formal, and I just want to emphasize that this is a starting point. This is a script maybe for a beginning canvasser who doesn't really feel comfortable ad-libbing too much, but I guarantee you that after you've done this about, read this script about 5 times, you'll start ad-libbing. For instance, I don't really like to start out and say, hi, my name is so-and-so, are you Cindy or whatever. I kind of like to just say a little bit about myself. So if I were doing this, I would probably feel more comfortable saying, hi, my name is Debbie, and I'm a volunteer with a local grassroots group today, and we're out talking to some voters. Are you Cindy? So I'll give just a little bit about what I'm doing before I start asking. Some people might prefer to read it just as it is, but it's flexible. So that's the first part of our script, beginning the conversation. And then we get to the questions. And this is where we're going to do some of that step 2, that all important step of empathetic listening. What issues, today we're looking to find out what issues matter most to you. Maybe the 2 things that you wish politicians would put the most effort into fixing. And then another way of asking this, someone suggested this at one of our earlier trainings, was something along these lines. Imagine if you had the ear of someone who controls some decision-making in our state. What would you tell them? What would you want them to fix? What would you want them to do? So that's another way of asking kind of that same question. And if someone were to say, well, I think, guns and education are the most important. That doesn't really tell us very much. So we have a second question here to kind of prompt a little bit more information. And that is, why are these issues important to you? Can you tell us a little bit more? And this is where, that listening comes in. Really try to listen to what they're saying, because one of the main things we're trying to do here is to try to identify whether these voters are going to be voting for progressive issues and progressive candidates. So some things to think about. Silence is your friend. Don't think about what you're going to say next. Listen for what you might ask them next. Show some real curiosity about what they're saying, ask some open-ended questions, And, a great way of kind of confirming what you think you're hearing is to just repeat back. I think what I hear you're saying is that, gun safety and, our children's safety in our schools is one of the most important issues for you right now. And, look for some common beliefs that you may have, something that you can, kind of relate to. So then the next step is to share a little bit about, kind of relate to what they have talked about with some personal story to kind of show that you were listening and to show that you're relating to them. And so this is a little bit tricky. And for those of you who signed up by last night, I sent you out a worksheet called Sharing Your Story, or My Story, I guess it's called. And it has a space for all of the issues that we are looking at. And, or I shouldn't say all the issues we're looking at, but all the issues that have kind of come up as we have done some pilot testing of this. And a place for you to maybe think about what questions you might ask the voter if they tell you, for instance, healthcare is the most important, or if they tell you gun safety is the most important to them. And then also maybe to think about a little story that you have to show that you can kind of relate to that person. So this is just a worksheet that you can do maybe before you go out canvassing, to give you a chance to kind of think about what if this voter that I'm talking to says that this issue is important to them? How might I try to relate to them?
So there was a question, Debbie, about what the worksheet says. So it's 3 columns. It has the issue on the left, and then the next column is the question, the empathetic question, and then the third column is the story ideas that you have, a place for you to take your notes. So apparently not everybody has.
Yeah, I sent it out last night to all those who were signed up as of last night, but I see we did get some more people signed up today. And so I am going to be sending this out to you after we're done today. And I can also put a link to it in the chat after I stop sharing my screen. So this basically looks just like this, but it's blank. And it's got more issues listed. So it's got about 12 or 13 issues listed. And then it's got a place for another issue too, and other. Okay, the fourth step, which is technically called reconciling conflicting views. We're not necessarily going to be trying to reconcile any conflicting views with this first initial touch of these voters. But if your first conversation with them about issues has given you enough information and it's very clear that this is a very conservative voter, or it's very clear that it's a very progressive voter, you actually may or may not even want to ask these questions. But perhaps if you need a little bit more information, and then also this information could be useful data to us down the road, we have a couple more questions here. How well do you think our state government is addressing your concerns? And how well do you think our federal government is addressing your concerns? And this just gives them a little bit more of a chance to voice their opinions or vent some frustrations about about how they think things are going currently. And again, to give us a little bit more information to try to decide whether this is a voter we want to remind to vote in November. So after asking these questions, then you have some analysis to do. You have to kind of think on your feet while you're talking to this voter. Because if this voter leans conservative, we want to just say, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts today, sharing your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and you can say goodbye. But if the voter tends to lean progressive and you think this is a person that we would want to go out and remind to vote in November, Then we have our fifth step, kind of the call to action. And that is just a little statement that says something along these lines. Thanks for talking with us today. We really hope you'll stay engaged and check out the candidates in this November's election to see who will best address your concerns, and then most importantly, vote. And then most importantly to you, the canvasser, is to mark this voter down on, it'll be question number 5, as to this voter we want to do a follow-up call. And so that will give us the data to go back to create some lists in November of voters that we've already contacted and identified as voters we want to remind to vote. So I think I'm going to stop right there and ask if there are some questions about the script. And before you start asking questions, I will tell you, we're going to share the script with you in a document form, and it'll also have some additional information. We're going to share with you how you might go about organizing a canvas or joining a canvas that's already being organized by us. But this is so just for now, questions just about the actual script.
So there's a question from Carl Vischer. Are we canvassing for coin or for a candidate?
For this, we are canvassing for coin. So it may happen that someone asks you about a candidate, and that's okay, to talk about that if the voter brings it up. But we aren't canvassing for a candidate. What we're doing is I like to think of it this way. We're canvassing for all candidates, for all progressive candidates, because what we're doing is we're trying to understand these non-affiliated voters and identify which ones of them are going to vote for our progressive candidates, so that we can, again, go back to them in November and remind them to vote, do GOTV efforts with them, and not reach out to those voters we identified as leaning conservative. So to me, there are a number of candidates that I would really like to work for and campaign for and canvass for. And it's hard to find time to do all of them. So I'm kind of choosing to put my efforts into this project because I feel like I can help all progressive candidates with this project. Other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
As far as phone calls, so the only time that are you making a phone call is when you have a confirmed person that you're just following up with, you want to remind them to vote, or are you following a script such as this and making having a list of potential PAVs and going off a script and then I don't know how that works with, with phone calls. Phone calls, I guess it would be with it, nobody answers their phone unless they know what the number is, so I don't know how that all works.
So it's a great question. And what we have done so far is that we have tried to do both canvassing and phone banking. And we've done this a couple of times. We've had a canvass on one day and we've had a phone bank for others on the same day. And so we will be doing, I'm kind of referring to this as canvassing, but we will also be doing the same exactly the same thing with the same script with phone banking also, to give people the option. So it's a great question, and thanks for bringing that up, because we will be doing both. And I'll be sharing with you our COIN voter outreach webpage, where you can go to find our calendar and what kind of events we have coming up when we're doing a canvas and when we're doing the phone bank and things like that, and places to sign up to join.
Beverly, I know that you did a phone bank during the last canvas that we did earlier this year. Could you maybe give a little information about how that went?
It really actually went really well. The thing about phone banking, for any of you who are phone bankers know that the gold standard and the fun one is when they do the vote dialer so that you don't have to dial the phone. So that's not the case when we do this. So you get to dial each telephone number. But the great thing about phone banking is even though you may only talk to 1 or 2 people out of maybe 20 calls, we're cleaning up lists because you're finding people who say, oh, they moved, disconnected or whatever. So cleaning up lists, as I said, our list that we have right now is very raw data, no data. All we know is who the voters are. We don't know anything about them. So we will be doing some more phone banking, and so stay tuned for that, because I know it's a way that a lot of people, you know, aren't going door to door still. So this is an opportunity for people to go ahead and do the voter outreach by phone banking. So stay tuned. We'll have some of those set up as well.
So, and I wanted to kind of follow up on that a little bit, because I thought maybe the question that came up might have been about the stage 2 after we identify. But I mean, I was thinking maybe I was actually asking 2 questions. One was your experience, but there is this second phase, and that second phase could happen with another door knock. It could happen with a phone bank. It could happen with a text. There's just many ways that we can reach out to those folks that we do identify. And again, as I mentioned earlier, once we get the people in our indivisible database, we'll have them, and that will benefit everybody, because we will have that information for another election in 2024. We will have that information that will potentially, if we're turning out more progressive voters who are NAVs, they are more likely to vote for multiple candidates that we potentially want. Not necessarily that they're going to vote a straight line or anything, but we believe that this will actually benefit us in many races. So that's really important. The third thing I wanted to mention was that in addition to the phone banking, and we do have a formal canvas opportunity for anybody in Deschutes County. We're going to be meeting at 2 o'clock in Sam Johnson Park in Redmond. And we're going to go for a canvas at 2 o'clock. Well, we're going to have some training and get together at 2. And then we're going to be going out to do a 2-hour canvas, and then meeting back up afterwards and going out for pizza and, you know, socializing after that. So we'll hope that you'll join us. And as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a similar type event next in August in Silverton. I believe it's on the 14th. Am I remembering that right?
Yes.
Of August.
Sunday, August 14th.
Okay, so that's going to be the date. Then I think it's going to be at noon. But in addition to these kind of organized efforts, we want to encourage people, once they've gone through this training, once they've tried it a little bit, that they can do their own thing. I mean, Debbie has the ability to cut turf and send it to you, and then you can do it whenever you want. You can get 2 or 3 of your friends together, call up Debbie, she can send you the turf, and then you guys can do it whenever you feel like. And then we get the data back. And so it doesn't have to be tied to a specific organized event. It can be. We do encourage everybody to come out for our events, but you can do your own thing. You can do it by yourself. You can do it with your, you know, your partner, you know, whatever you want to do. So you've got all these different options. That's what we really like about this program, is that, you know, we want people to participate however they want to engage with this. If you want to just do it as phone banking, that's great. If you want to join our, you know, our formal things, that's great too. So yeah, those are all fun things to do.
So just as an example, I think we had a canvas back in March in the Selwood area. And so that was kind of our main canvas event. But we had a couple of women in Seaside who wanted to canvas in Seaside that same day. So I just hopped on a quick Zoom with them. They showed me on a map kind of where they wanted to canvas, and I cut the turf for them to canvas, sent them the lists by email, and they were canvassing the same time we were. and entering their data through Minivan. And then also Beverly has a couple of gals down in Florence who have been canvassing kind of on a regular basis. They just go out when they have time, and they're kind of working through their whole county or city there.
Precinct.
Yeah. And so this Sunday, we'll have a main group in Redmond, but I've got some friends here in the Dalles who don't want to go to Redmond. And so I'm cutting some turf for them to do the same thing here in the Dalles. So, it's very flexible, and we will send you this information also about how to either join an organized canvas or how to ask for some lists to canvas in your own neighborhood. And we're here to support you, that your COIN voter outreach team is here to support you. And so with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and
I just wanted to say,
screen share for just a minute.
interrupt you real quick, Debbie.
Yeah.
We do suggest that you go out in partners, go by yourself. If you're an experienced canvasser, it's daylight. I know Jeff Kidder canvasses by himself, and anybody that knows Jeff. But we really do recommend that you go in pairs. It is, it's a safety thing, and it's more fun. So Bonnie, when it comes to finding people to, getting people interested, as you mentioned in the chat, if you could just get one or two people, one person to go with you, and then you talk about it with everybody and share your experiences. What we're finding out is that people want to talk. It's not, there hasn't been a negative experience. And another group up in Skagit County, Washington, did this the exact same thing. And they were giving a report last night at the Indivisible conference about the reception that they got, and how interesting it was. And there wasn't a bad conversation. So that sort of tension about, oh, it's going to be really scary, and it's going to be, people are going to slam the door in my face. In the experience of the people that we know, Debbie's been out, Mary's been out, there's been no door slamming. Am I correct? Right. So people, it's interesting. Humans on a one-on-one basis are really actually kind of nice to each other.
Bonnie, to go a little bit further on your question, that is always a challenge. And so one of the things that I think is helpful is just to find one person to go out canvassing with you, or join a group that's already canvassing somewhere else. And you might have to drive a little bit, but for instance, the canvas in Redmond on Sunday, we want to make that fun. So we're going to have some snacks, and we're going to have a meetup afterwards for some social time, and we're going to provide some food. And Indivisible, as many of you may know, has been very generous with funds for gathering events. And so there are opportunities for us to provide food for groups to gather after canvassing. So make it fun. And
Bonnie's going to come to the Dalles and canvas with your Dalles group.
I have to go to Home Depot anyway, so I'll just bring my clipboard and.
You and I can talk some more about this.
Okay.
I've just put a bunch of links in the chat that I've been kind of talking about today. The first one is the script. So that's, to not look at it in pieces like I showed you on the slides. You can see the whole script put together. There's a great document that's mostly begged, borrowed, and stolen from Indivisible about how to organize a canvas or phone bank in your own area. And then there's a sign up for the canvas that we have in Redmond on Sunday. And then also I put a link to our COIN voter outreach page, which will have our training and future training schedule and canvas and phone bank schedule. So the only thing that's listed on there right now is this training or the canvas we have coming up in Redmond. but we're making some final decisions about the next one in August and then one in September also. Yeah, and Beverly just put in the chat, if you have a group, for instance, if your Indivisible group would like to, find out more about this, we would be happy to do this training for your Indivisible meeting one night. Just let us know. I mean, that's what we're here for. We just want to see this program spread as much as we can throughout the state and get as many people committed to talking to NAVS as we can, and start collecting this data. We do have we did want to save a little bit of time for people who haven't ever used Minivan before. So I want to kind of conclude here by asking if there are any additional questions or anything that we can help you with at this point. Oh, I'm also going to put my email address in here because I'm the turf cutter. And I will, if you want me to cut you some turf so you can get started right away, just send me an email and I will work with you to help you get going in your own community.
I think she really likes cutting turf.
I do.
It's secrets out. She's a turf cutter.
Yes. I also wanted to mention, in case some people might drop off, but if you've already got experience with Minivan, before you do drop off, I wanted to let people know about a separate event that Indivisible Sisters is holding. We don't have the link yet because that's coming from National, but we are going to have a text bank that's going to be for Jamie McLeod Skinner on July 31st from 6 to 8 p.m. And this is going to be again, we're going to be trying to this is going to be aimed at the non-affiliated voters, because we are really interested in making sure that we get her name out, and we also find those of them who are inclined to vote for her so that we can then keep after them and make sure that we get them to vote. So that is going to be another separate event that we're going to have. It's going to be via Zoom, and if you participated in any of the other text banks we had during the primary, they were super fun. I mean, I had never done text banking before, and I had a blast. It was so fun. So I totally want if you are hesitant thinking like, oh, text banking, I don't know how to do this or whatever, please don't feel like shy. It is super, super, super fun. I wish I'd been doing this for the last 4 years. It is really, really fun. So,
what's the date again?
The date is July 31st. And it'll be starting at 6, and we will be putting out the link to sign up for this. I just don't have it yet because it has to come from National, and they promised to get it to me ASAP. So just want to mark your calendar. Please think about it. It is so fun. I mean, it is super fun.
And with that, those of you who want to stay on and get a little help with using Minivan, which is an app on your phone that you can input this data on, and it goes straight to our system, so that we don't have to enter the data by hand anymore. So it's a great system, and we encourage people to use it, but we do have some other options if people aren't comfortable with that. But anyway, that's what we have planned for the last few minutes here. Questions, comments? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Teddy?
I was on Facebook today, and I was really kind of shocked at the negativity that I was seeing about voting in Oregon. I've lived here since 1989, so I had the opportunity to have polling places where I lived. But what I was reading today is that it was all disinformation.
Uh-oh, you froze. Oh, Teddy froze.
We can't hear you. Well, while we're waiting for Teddy's internet, any other questions or comments, suggestions to make this simpler, easier for everybody?
We have such a great group from all around the state here tonight. It's really kind of exciting. So first of all, thank you all for, thank you all for joining us and your interest is awesome. Teddy, you're back. Oh, now you're muted.
Unmute yourself.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think people should check in these forums and see what people are saying, and because the young people that use these and connect in that way, if a lot of this is reinforced and say that we don't have a good way of voting here in Oregon, then I'm afraid that a million people that are possibly going to be I'm sorry,
Disengaged. Yeah.
disengaged, right? Because you're kind of trying to educate people and to help them learn how to be responsible citizens and take the responsibility of voting, which
Right.
we all appreciate. That is very important. And that's why I think we're all here. So these are young people that need to be helped. And
Voter education
Go
is
ahead,
very
Mary.
much a part of this. And when we see things like that, whatever you can do to, we have to fight that disinformation. Indivisible has a program called the Truth Brigade, and it's a really great to sign up for that and learn the techniques and skills to send out good messaging to counteract and not amplify that bad messaging, because we absolutely do not want to amplify the the bad actors and the bad information. So there's some more that you can do to help with that.
Also, I wanted to just kind of reassure you a little bit. We do see things like that in Facebook, but in 2020, of course, that was almost 2 years ago, but in 2020, we saw that the actual turnout voting percentage was about 80%. And of the non-affiliated voters, it was lower, but it was still pretty high. It was like 63%, if my memory is serving correctly. And so we do have a pretty engaged population in terms of voting because of the fact that our vote by mail system has been around for such a long time. We've had it for over 20 years now, and it's not a partisan issue. It's been really well accepted by everyone as a fair, transparent, and effective way to vote. And a lot of people, they like getting the voter pamphlet, being able to look at it. So it really comes from a very strong, it has a strong base of support among Oregon's electorate, I think it's fair to say. And the other thing is, I mentioned the fact that the number of voters, it increased by something like 600 or 800,000 voters in a very short period of time. And so everybody was expecting the percentage of participation to go down because the numbers had gotten so much bigger. They did go down a little bit initially, but now they're back up where they were previously with a much smaller voting population. So I think that all augurs really pretty well. It is true that the last 2 years have been just very tough on everybody in terms of, all of the tales that have been told about fraud and election fraud and all that kind of stuff. But in Oregon, I do think that we are, lucky to have a well, accepted and a high level of participation, even with our high registration numbers.
And one last comment about Teddy's concerns, and that is that when we have these conversations with people, that may come up. And it's amazing how you'll find quickly that the script doesn't really prepare you for the conversations that you'll actually have. But when we send people out, and these are resources that I've provided you with here, and I'll provide you with some more in a follow-up email. But we send voters out with a QR code, a big picture of the QR code that has the voter registration page, and so they can just point their phone at it and it'll take them straight to the Secretary of State website. And so when we have had canvasses, we've actually had people who helped people register or change their registration from non-affiliated to Democrat right there. So when you actually participate in a canvas, there will be opportunities for, you know, talking to voters about those very kinds of things.
And that's what this, you know, a lot of this is, anytime you do any kind of voter engagement, it's so much of it is voter education. And that's why this is such a good long-term program, because there are so many people that are disengaged, and in the non-affiliated voter group, particularly disengaged. So this is, we need like a whole bunch of us to be out there doing this. We're getting started, you know, you have to start. And so this is our start. And so we appreciate all of you who are interested and want to go and help with this super important voter engagement project.
So we want to respect your time. We're already about 15 minutes over. So
Yep.
those of you who don't want to work on the minivan app on the phone, we'll say goodnight to you, and you can just go ahead and sign out. And those of you who do, I'm just going to go ahead and screen share here briefly again, and ask you to go ahead, and if you have already done so, if you've already downloaded Minivan, then I've prepared a few list numbers here for you to practice with.